Hey everyone, it's Lucas. So this is my presentation. I'll be discussing a question posed by a small case study published in the NeuroCase Journal by the following authors. And their study is looking into the question of a man with primary progressive dynamic aphasia. And so that question is, if language centers in your brain are damaged through something like aphasia, does your musical communication get disrupted as well? But a quick little background, just in case you're not familiar. Aphasia isn't new. It's been recorded in medical journals as far back as the Edwin Smith Papyrus. This is what that looks like. Yeah, it's pretty old. But even in these ancient Egyptian medical texts, the symptoms are pretty much the same. Usually, something like a seizure will cause speech problems because of damage from usually either Broca's area or Wernicke's area. But this case is a little bit different because this is primary progressive aphasia, which, unlike normal aphasia, which is like a single incident that damages the brain, primary progressive aphasia is a lot more like Alzheimer's or something like that, where it's a neurodegenerative disease. There you go. So, our study follows a 76-year-old man who researchers call ADY. And he's had symptoms of primary progressive aphasia for the last 4 years. So there was an initial 4 experiments to test his language, followed by 2 additional musical tests to test his music proficiency. And I'll be going over just the music ones today. The first test was a continuation of musical sequences. So there was 20 short musical tone sequences, which were shuffled randomly and presented to him, and his job was to initially just complete the set of notes by filling in the last note, or notes if he chose more than one. And they were split up into high probability and low probability melodic continuations, which is basically just to say like an easy and a hard mode. And they were supposed to sort of parallel the language tests that they did, which also had a similar structure to them. Now, compared to how we did on the language tests, ADY actually did much better on these musical tests. He was able to generate a continuation for every single musical sequence, which he was not able to do for the language ones. For most of them, what he would do is repeat typically the first 3 to 6 notes of the test sequence, but with a new congruent series of notes, which they called variant responses. And of these variant responses, almost all of them were equal in length, if not longer than the actual sequence itself. But importantly, all of them ended in correct notes, which made sense with the music. So this showed that he was able to make new, unique, novel music and communicate it easily without problem, unlike language. In 6 of the variant low probability responses, he produced a new series of notes that led to a clear, distinct conclusion to the melody that was not implied in the original test sequence. And the way the paper describes this is kind of like turning the sentence, John went to town to buy a blank, into John went to town to post a letter, which is a novel, unique conclusion to that sentence, which is very difficult with aphasia. In the high probability one, he would end it with one note that would be appropriate to the song. So, in conclusion, this experiment was completely different than the language ones they had done. In that one, the low probability words, he would often not respond at all, and if he did, it would be extremely short and brief. While in this one, he would give elaborate, complex, novel answers that weren't implied by the question to begin with, which is really unique for something like this. And he showed no impairment overall with his musical ability. In the second experiment, it was a little bit more open-ended. So they would show ADY an example of a small test sequence. It would be, I believe, 3 to 5 notes, and asked him to expand it in any way he felt And in every single case, he was able to expand the test sequences of notes into sequences ranging from 8 to 20 notes in length, which was a staggering difference. Even when musical context did not provide strong indication of how the melody should develop, he performed equally well on low probability musical continuations and musical elaborations as on the high probability music continuations. So he had no issues with both the difficult tasks and the easy tasks. Now, obviously, a big limitation of this study is that it was only one person. I think you would want to have, a wide sample of people for something like this, for a larger scale study. But I do think it's really interesting, and I think it could help a lot for people who have aphasia to find some sort of creative output through music or something similar as a way to express themselves, which is a very difficult thing to do with aphasia. So overall, he was able to show a high level of proficiency with musical tasks, which he did not show with language tasks. So from this, we can kind of gather that aphasia doesn't negatively affect some of the parts of your brain that you might use for something like listening or making music. Overall, I think that aphasia is a super interesting topic, and it's super interesting to see what does and doesn't get affected by these super important language centers in your brain that we really take for granted. So I would say overall, art and music should be something explored for people with aphasia, and definitely more research needs to be done about that. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you at class.